Welcome back to another episode of The Fighter and the Writer. I'm Chris Mannix. He's Sergio Mora. He's the fighter. I'm the writer. On this episode, we are going to talk about the biggest fight in the heavyweight division, Jake Paul against Anthony Joshua, happening on Friday night in Miami. The buzz is picking up this week about Paul against AJ. We're going to talk about everything that has to do with that fight. We're also going to talk about Nonito Donaire coming up just short of another world championship, and Tim Tszyu starting his comeback over in Australia. But Sergio, we got to start with the biggest news of the week, and that is the breaking story that Terence Crawford is retiring from boxing. 5-division world champion, reigning unified super middleweight champion. He is calling it a career at 38 years of age. Crawford announced his retirement on Tuesday, saying in a video posted on his YouTube page, quote, "I've made peace with what's next. Now it's time." Here's a little bit more from that video.
Every fighter knows this moment will come. We just never know when. I've spent my whole life chasing something. Not belts, not money, not headlines, but that feeling, the one you get when the world doubts you, but you keep showing up and you keep proving everyone wrong.
Unbelievable performance.
This sport gave me everything. I fought for my family. I fought for my city. I fought for the kid I used to be, the one who had nothing but a dream and a pair of gloves. And I did it all my way.
It cannot be overstated how sensational Terence Crawford is.
I gave this sport every breath I had, every scar, every triumph.
Terence Bud Crawford is the pound-for-pound king.
Every ounce of my heart.
The fighting pride of Omaha, Nebraska, USA, and new Ring Magazine, an undisputed super middleweight champion of the world.
And I've made peace with what's next. And now, it's time. Thank you.
Sergio Crawford is undefeated. He is pound for pound number one. He is coming off the biggest win of his professional career, and he was in line for some huge paydays in 2026. What do you make of him calling it quits?
Well, that was me applauding in the background there, Mannix, because I can't believe he did that. And in one of these Fighter and the Writer episodes, I told you that would be the biggest mic drop for Bud Crawford, to walk off into the sunset, after doing everything he just did, becoming undisputed in a third weight division, 5-division champion at 38 years old, retiring rich, healthy, and with all his faculties on top of the world. I mean, that's what everyone wants to do in boxing and never does. Bud Crawford just did it. So that's me saluting and applauding him, because it takes so much pride and intelligence, pride swallowing, and intelligence, and a good team around you for a fighter to make that decision. Floyd Mayweather Jr. is probably the one that set the blueprint and really, let everyone know that's the way to go for fighters. Retire with a lot of money, forget what the critics say, leave on your terms. And then Andre Ward did it a little younger. And now the great Bud Crawford did it, man. It's incredible. And it really sets a precedence for fighters moving forward. What do you want to be? Do you want to be that tough guy that's in the Hall of Fame but can't spell your name and doesn't have 2 cents to rub together, but every fan's going to want a picture with you, but you're going to be broke? Or do you want to be that rich, smart, undefeated, undisputed, if you're as great as Crawford, going off into the sunset and going straight into the Hall of Fame, but you're going to have critics? I don't know about you, Mannix. I'd rather be the latter.
Yeah, I don't think he has critics either. I think that Look, I'll just speak for myself. I was surprised that he called it quits. In the last couple of months, I know there have been talks about a next fight for Terence Crawford. And I'll run you through some of the things that I heard. In the immediate aftermath of the Canelo fight, I was told by someone in Crawford's camp that they had made offers to Canelo for the rematch. This was before Canelo had the elbow surgery. Like, they were interested in running it back. Huge pile of money to run it back. There was an approach to Crawford by Jake Paul's team to step in for Gervonta Davis and fight Jake Paul in December. Crawford declined at the time, but he didn't decline and say never. He said he didn't want to do it in December. I was also told that there were some talks about a Riyadh season event for Terence Crawford in March of next year. And then the cherry on top, you had Eddie Reynoso coming out this past week saying that Canelo wants the rematch against Terence Crawford in September. So all those things made me believe that fighting was still on the mind of Terence Crawford. Clearly, it is not. Clearly, he believes, correctly, I might add, that he's accomplished everything he's needed to accomplish. He is not only all the things that we just talked about, the only male fighter to be a 3-weight class undisputed champion in the 4-belt era. I know that's a mouthful, but doing it at 140, 147, and then going all the way to 168 and getting it done against Canelo. There are no critics out there for Terence Crawford. Nobody is saying he has to give Canelo Alvarez a rematch if he doesn't want to fight. Nobody is saying he has to go down to 160 and fight Erislandy Lara. Nobody is saying he has to fight Boots Ennis or Virgil Ortiz or any of the other top names that are out there. He doesn't have to do it. So I guess I was just surprised because everything I had been hearing leading up to this point was that Crawford was looking at his options for 2026.
No, that, and it was the money for you as well. The innate avarice of a Boston boy, always thinking money. Fighters don't do it for money. They do it for belts, but this man already conquered and got every belt you could think of. So the belts wasn't doing it for him, and the money certainly wasn't doing it for him. It was the fact that he already gave everything that he had. He's been doing this since he was a young kid. All of us has been doing it since we were young. And all we ever thought about was the world knowing our name, becoming a world champion, and making a lot of money where we can take care of a family. Crawford did that and then some. When you lose that ability to be able to focus and really train and harness your hunger to go into another camp with that same energy and drive that you had since you were a kid, that's when you know you're not supposed to be boxing. And it takes intelligence. That's why I always say it takes intelligent fighters to know when they have nothing else to give. When you're just fighting for money, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get hurt. I mean, look at history. The greatest to ever do it, Sugar Ray Robinson retired too late. Muhammad Ali retired too late. Sugar Ray Leonard retired too late. Roberto Duran retired too late. They all got beaten to submission later in their careers. Now there's these fighters like I'm talking about, Mayweather Jr., Andre Ward. Let's throw Ricardo Lopez in there too.
Let me throw a few more in there for you. I mean, Rocky Marciano retired after knocking out Archie Moore. You want to go all the way back to an undefeated guy. Lennox Lewis retired after that Klitschko fight. Joe Calzaghe retired undefeated. I mean, it's not unique what Crawford's doing, but it's much rarer than the reverse. All the guys you mentioned that have stayed along too long. Go into a more modern era. The great Roy Jones stayed around way too long. Oscar De La Hoya was retired by Manny Pacquiao. Bernard Hopkins was knocked out of the ring by Joe Smith Jr. Like, more often, you have those types of situations. So I always applaud a fighter that retires from boxing and doesn't let boxing retire him.
No, you applaud and admire because the average fan, like the average person like yourself, the average fan can't understand how a man that made $50 million in his last fight, probably going to double that if they have the rematch or close to it.
It would have been, if he had run it back with Canelo, it would have been a career high payday for him. And he's made some big paydays in the last couple.
Say it would have been 80 million, 90 million, whatever it would have been. That is, unfathomable, if that's the word. I can't imagine fighters making that. I mean, that's insane. Crawford just left that on the table because there's no more hunger left. He did everything he had to do, and he has And he has everything he wants in life. Can you imagine how long that dollar stretches in Omaha, Nebraska? I mean, he's gonna own acres.
Just to underscore this point, he does not spend a lot of money. And you're right, living in Omaha, Nebraska, the way he is, that dollar goes a long way. He's pals with Warren Buffett, so I'm sure his investments are solid. He's not going to have to worry. He has generational wealth generally, but more so for a guy living in the Midwest.
So there's two oracles of Omahas now. It's going to be the great Warren Buffett and the great Terence Crawford in different fields. But here's the intelligent part that I like about Crawford. He knew not only that he was near the end because of his age. I mean, he's 38 years old, the money and all that. But the fact that against Madrimov, even though he won the fight, two judges had it 115, 113. One judge's scorecard, it could have been a draw. He blemishes his record. Canelo Alvarez, two judges had it 115, 113. One of those judges has it different, blemishes his record. So he's that close to blemishing his record, whether it's with a draw or a loss. Whether he got it, deserves it, it doesn't matter. He can't say he's leaving the sport undefeated. So when you're playing with that fire that close, you got to put all that into perspective. Say, all right, man, I got away with it once, against twice. That's it. I'm not gonna stick around for a third time. I'm gonna call it a career because I checked every box I wanted to check off in this great career of mine. And I mentioned haters, Mannix. I mentioned critics. I said with Crawford, because it goes to show you that even when you have a incredibly perfect career, infallible career, you're still gonna have haters. You're still gonna have those people in boxing saying, well, who did he beat?
Yeah, but can I ask you
what
this?
names did he
Can I
fight?
ask you this? Like, who?
And those guys piss me off.
But this is where you got to. To me, this is where you got to separate like people in boxing versus people on Twitter. Like, does Crawford have haters on Twitter? Of course he does. Does he have haters in the media? No. Does he have haters in boxing? No. Anybody that knows anything about boxing, even a casual boxing fan, knows that Terence Crawford is an all-time great, knows that he is one of the great 140s of all time, one of the great 147s, and has the distinction of really climbing 3 weight classes to beat the man at 168 pounds to go undisputed. So I just think we have to separate what some doofuses on social media are saying about Terence Crawford and what people that are actually studying the sport, follow the sport, know the sport are saying about Bud Crawford.
Okay, all right. So then why did it take him so long to get the biggest fights of his career? He was in his mid-30s when he finally got these opportunities. We know the answer to that question. Though. We know Al Heyman, he was on the other side of the street. Like Errol Spence was on the right side of the street. So you can't call that a way of...
That's not hating. That's strategic. Like
strategic hating. There you go.
It's not hating at all, though. Terence Crawford wasn't an Al Heyman guy. He was lined up with Top Rank for the formative years of his career. Errol Spence was with Heyman. That's why Errol Spence got Sean Porter. Errol Spence got Mikey Garcia. Errol Spence got Danny Garcia. Errol Spence got all the big fights and all the big title opportunities because of politics. It happens in other divisions and with other promoters, but this was a very high-profile example of politically Crawford being on the wrong side of the divide.
All right, so he was on the wrong side of the street, and because of that...
I think Al Heyman has enormous respect for Terence Crawford.
Of course he does. I mean, he loves boxing. I'm not saying he was hating. I'm saying the politics behind it was hating against Bud Crawford that didn't open a real big opportunity and a real big financial door until he was already in his mid-30s. And by then, he capitalized. He was able to get the 3 biggest fights that made the most money, and he went off into the sunset. But come on, man. At 34, 35 years old, that's not a fighter's prime. Crawford's just a unique, incredible athlete, but that's not a fighter's prime. Can you imagine if Crawford would have had these opportunities in his late 20s? Can you imagine that? What he was doing to all these other, names and champions, knocking them out. He should have been doing it on the all-time greatest level, and where everyone was watching, not on ESPN, not on these smaller undercards. He should have been, doing it a long time ago. But I'm glad that it finally happened, though.
Look, you can't say the ESPN stuff is kind of a weird argument. ESPN is a fire hose. ESPN is a bigger broadcast network than HBO. Like ESPN's big. His problem was the fights. He couldn't get the fights. I would have loved to have seen him face the guys that Errol Spence had faced. Faced a Danny Garcia in his prime, faced Sean Porter in his prime, like faced Errol Spence close prime. I actually think the outcomes would have been the same. I think he beats Errol Spence at whatever stage of Errol Spence's career. I think that those years, and it really just comes down to one weight class. Those years at 147 were not as productive as they could have been because of boxing politics.
I'm not hating against ESPN. Let me just, go back and, explain what I was talking about. I mean, I was a main event on ESPN 7 times. I know what reach it has, but whenever you're fighting on HBO, on Showtime, that was where you seen the greatest fighters fight, the biggest names. Everyone was watching those, especially when it was on pay-per-view. ESPN was, more where it trickled down in talent. And Crawford was headlining those events until finally he was on the undercards of HBO. And then finally, when the big money came in towards the end of his career, he was able to headline incredible shows where Eminem is performing. That's the difference of scale that I'm talking about. But all in all, he got it. And the fact that he finally got a taste of this grandeur towards the end of his career and was able to leave it as soon as he got a taste, that's incredible. Fighters do not do that. Fighters, anybody. I would think the ambition of man won't do it because you're saying, I worked, 30 years of my life to get to this point, and I'm going to leave all that on the table? I mean, one more fight. I can have another generation of family taken care of just with one more fight. But very few do it and not come back. That's another thing. If they do it, they always come back. And then they tarnish their legacy, or they ruin their career, or they have a bad night in the office, or boxing retires them, and then it's kind of like, why did I do that? But that's just the arrogance and ignorance of a champion and his mindset.
Yeah. Well, so in the aftermath of this announcement, I had some people in boxing texting me going, he's not really retired. Even this week during the Jake Paul fight week, Jake Paul saying he's not really retired. There's some people that believe this is simply a negotiating tactic, that he's retired now, but if the bag gets bigger for a Canelo rematch, he's going to be back. Do you think that this is a real retirement, or do you think that we'll see Crawford back in 2026?
Does Terence Crawford remind you of Tyson Fury in any way?
No.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Me neither. Tyson Fury's a showman. He's a carnival barker. He's a promoter. He's a big mouth. Crawford's type of dude. He's a bad boy that moves in silence and violence, like they like to say. I mean, this guy's just, he looks at you with a laser stare, and it's like, I'm going to get you, and I'm going to take everyone else that doubted me. And then once I do that, that's it. I did what I wanted to do. You're not going to force me out of retirement. You're not going to force me to come back. It reminds me of something the great Nazim Richardson, the trainer, Philadelphia great trainer, once said. It was me, Andre Ward, and Nazim Richardson on the set of Contender 5 when Andre Ward was the host. And I remember Andre walked off, and then Nazim looked at me and said, as much as I admire that kid, as great as he was as a boxer, do you know the reason he won't come back to boxing? Because what made him a great fighter was discipline and intelligence. What's going to keep him retired is intelligence and discipline. It takes discipline to not come back for money. You hear rumblings of Andre Ward saying Anthony Joshua, saying what if, but he's not going to do it. He won't do it because he's just that damn great. Only discipline can get you past the wants and the ambitions and the what ifs, and very few have it. And Andre Ward is one of those guys. Nazim Richardson called it back then, and I think Nazim Richardson, if he was alive now, would say the same thing about Terence Crawford.
So the only reason I believe there's a chance that we see Crawford again, you mentioned some of the guys you mentioned there, Ward, for example. Like, Ward retired after he beat Kovalev twice. Ward had beaten the boogeyman at 175. At that time, there wasn't like an obvious super payday out there for Andre Ward. There were some good fights that he could make, but there wasn't a super payday. This Canelo rematch is a super payday. Like, Lennox Lewis retires after the Klitschko fight. There were big fights for Lennox Lewis, but not the super payday that's potentially out there for Terence Crawford. I understand Crawford's got tons of money, never has to worry about it. His kids never have to worry about it. But if there's like a $75 million bag put in front of him, a chance to go at Canelo one more time, a guy that even though it was competitive, you and I both agree, it was a clean win for Terence Crawford, a guy that he beat and closed strong against. I'm going to put, like, if we're going to go percentage chances, I'm going to say Terence Crawford is 90% retired with a 10% chance that a big enough bag can get him out of retirement.
After that, that video that he put out, what do you call that? Where you put a bunch of clips of your life. Montage. There you go. Great word, Mannix. After Bud Crawford put out that montage and really narrated it, it was powerful, man, because it shows his youth, his teenage years, and ultimately his adult life. He included thanking and being gracious for all the people that have been in his corner. And that's another thing, man. You know, a lot of fighters, once they go off into the sunset, they forget about all the people that helped them get there, not Bud Crawford. So this guy has integrity, man. He has intelligence, discipline, and integrity. And because of all those qualities, man, I know it's probably 90, I won't say 100% because you never know. I'll say 98%, man. I say 98% Terence Crawford is gone. He's gone, and if you didn't enjoy the show, you better watch him on YouTube because this was an all-time great that showed us greatness while he was here. And if you were too late to the party, that's on you, man, because Bud Crawford did something sensational. And now it's in the history books.
What do you think Crawford does? What's his next move?
You're still gonna hear him in boxing. I mean, he's probably gonna bring up the next crop of greats from Omaha. He's probably gonna, be a promoter. He's probably gonna want to open up gyms for the youth. You're probably gonna see him in Wall Street with Warren Buffett. You're probably gonna see him, do some acting.
Acting? Now you're all over the place now. All this stuff.
Because that's what fighters do. Look at Marvin Hagler.
So he's gonna move to Italy and
no. This is a man of many talents, man. I mean, he could be the bad guy. He can be a lot of things. He's one of these guys, man. Just uber talented.
Marvin Hagler, by the way, is another guy that kind of retired on top too. He officially lost that fight to Sugar Ray Leonard, but the reason there was no rematch wasn't Sugar Ray Leonard. It was Marvin Hagler that didn't want to do the rematch. I remember Ray, I think you were there, and you've heard the story, I'm sure, but Ray telling me that he was at Caesar's Palace months after the fight.
He told me the story.
Months after the fight with Hagler, and he walks up to Hagler in a ballroom. It was like some kind of event, maybe an award ceremony. Walks up to Hagler and says, "Hey, Marvin, let's do the rematch. You know how much money's on the table for us? Let's do the rematch." And Marvin told him to get a life. Told him to get a life, and that was the last he heard from Marvin Hagler.
Because Marvin Hagler has integrity and all the things that I just mentioned about Bud Crawford. You don't embarrass me in front of people. Remember when Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler were in that Tux event where Sugar Ray Leonard got up on stage and he was looking at Marvin Hagler and he was telling the whole crowd, a rematch with this great man will be one of the biggest fights in boxing history. Unfortunately, it'll never happen. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, my God. That left Marvin seething, So the pride of that great man was like, screw you, pretty boy. All right? I'm settling off into the Italian sunset, and I'm forgetting about you, this business, and everyone involved in it. So even when Sugar Ray Leonard did come back, and maybe he was half serious, Marvin wasn't having it.
I think he was fully serious about that
Bud's
rematch.
not having it. I don't think Bud's having it, man. Bud's
All right, so you got it 98% retired. I'm going 90. The two of us both think he's probably most likely done. One of the byproducts of this retirement is that it does set up the super middleweight division to get pretty interesting. Now you've got 4 belts that are available. You've got, I'm looking at these rankings, Osley Iglesias, who's a beast. He's number 1 in the IBF. He's probably going to get a title. Armando Resendez is the WBA's interim champion. He's right now negotiating a fight with Edgar Berlanga. So Edgar Berlanga get a shot at a full title in the first quarter of this year. Another big fight for Edgar Berlanga. Christian Mbily's the interim champ with the WBC. We've heard some stuff about Mbili and Hamza Shiraz potentially fighting for that belt. And we just saw Diego Pacheco, highly ranked by the WBO. He could be in line for a title shot. So we all want to see Bud Crawford active if you want to be a champion and keep fighting. But I think, you could get some good fights out of it in the super middleweight division with Bud Crawford out of the mix.
Yeah, it's time for the new generation. I think Bud Crawford, he's already the old great around the block. He's 38, man. You can't question everything he did. So now it's up to the new generation. Diego Pacheco didn't really impress anyone this last time out, and he's on a third straight fight where he hasn't really impressed people and reminded anybody, especially his critics, that he's the future of the super middleweight division. So Diego has some question marks. This Iglesias kid?
Osles Iglesias.
I haven't really studied him, but I know that he's this Cuban amateur sensation. I haven't really studied him, so I can't really speak on him. But Berlanga, you know what I feel about Berlanga. He'll never win a world championship, and I can't believe...
He might beat Resendez.
And I don't think he beats him either. I can't believe the incredible success this man is having, but it goes to show you what a big mouth and a big punch will get you in boxing. Incredible. And a great manager in Keith Conley. But yeah, the door's wide open for anybody at 160 and 168 to be the next one in line to pick up these belts and try to unify and be the top dog.
All right, so it's a rare week where we've had some interesting fights during the week. And we had an interesting fight over in Japan, an interesting fight over in Australia. I want to start in Japan, where Nonito Donaire lost his bid to become a world champion once again, dropping a split decision to Saie Satsumi in a 118-pound title bite. Sergio Donaire is now 1-3 in his last 4 bouts. Didn't look bad against Satsumi. Split decision. But at 43 years old, is this the last we're going to see of Nonito Donaire?
I hope so. I hope it is. And I see Nonito, we see Nonito in a lot of shows.
He's everywhere. He's omnipresent.
Everywhere. Yes, he is. And I think he will probably still fight on, but then it goes back to what I'm talking about. This is what happens to every legendary great. Boxing ends up retiring them. The Satsumi fight, I watched it this morning. It was actually a pretty damn good performance by Nonito. Flashes of the old great were there in that first half of the fight. But then once you get to the second half of the fight and those 43-year-old legs aren't what they used to, and then when you have a 29-year-old that's not on your level in talent, but he has the strength, the legs, the stamina, starts pushing you back, treating you like an older fighter, then you saw what happened. He lost a split decision. But Nonito Donaire's already proved that he can come back and do great things. I mean, when he almost beat the monster, in a way, that would have been incredible all-time pound-for-pound greatness of what this man did. He came up short, then he got stopped in the second fight. But then he won some fights. He went on a little winning streak. You can't question a guy like Nonito Donaire, but I can, because I've been following this man. I've known him since he was a teenager, since we were kids in the amateurs. He's always been great. I can't tell him what to do. So if he still has the hunger in his belly, then let him continue fighting. I hope he doesn't fight, because he came up short with a young champion with no resume. This Satsumi guy, I looked at his resume. He hasn't fought anybody. It's a soft resume, and he picked up one of these, WBA straps that any title holder can pick up. So I hope that Nonito Donaire doesn't get this foolish pride brewing inside of him, saying, well, I lost a split decision, maybe I can continue fighting. Because no, it was just against that one guy. Satsumi was that one guy that you could actually do well against for half a fight, not against these other killers in this division. So I hope it's his last fight.
Yeah, I was rooting for him to win, because if he had won that fight, it could have set up some interesting matchups. I mean, Chocolatito is still out there thinking about getting back in the ring. Juan Francisco Estrada is out there at 118 pounds. These are guys that were not in each other's orbit during the prime years of their career. Could have made some really interesting television fights if Donaire had won. He didn't look bad enough to make me think he has to retire. He had Satsumi buckled, once during that fight. Again, it was a split decision, but the legs aren't what they used to be. The skills aren't what they used to be. He's in a division that's kind of open. Junto Nakatani's not there anymore. So maybe he circles back and can get a fight in the next 6 months to a year with another champion. But yeah, because I like Nonito, I wouldn't mind seeing him walk away either.
He's doing it for the money, Mannix. All right, he's doing it for the money more than the belts and the championships and the accolades, because he's already in the Hall of Fame as soon as he retires. Yeah. All right, so let's just get this out of the way. Nonito Donaire is doing it for the money, because if you look at his career highest paydays, they haven't touched 7 figures, which is which is it's mind blowing. That
Probably made some good money in the World Boxing Super Series.
the biggest payday of Nonito Donaire's career is no more than $500,000.
I know he said that, but I'm not sure if I fully.
And he told us that.
I know. I remember. Yeah.
And I mean, it's public record. I'm not saying something that no one should know. And that's a shame because he's given so much. He's fought the absolute best. This guy's an all-time great. I say it all the time. Nonito Donaire is your favorite fighter's favorite fighter. Roy Jones Jr. loved Nonito Donaire, and I love Roy Jones Jr. But I know that Nonito's in a weight class in a division that now can have a lot of money, and with the big players that have been coming into boxing, now Nonito can make the money that he's always craved. But now at this age, he's going to get hurt. So it's all up to Nonito whether he wants to get the rematch with this guy. I think that would be the best bet. If he decides to go have a rematch with Tsutsuni as fast as possible, and that's maybe how he should come back and pick up a belt and then pick up that mega payday, whether it's going to be, it's going to be a punishing payday after this Tsutsumi fight, but that's the way it goes, man. Every legend dies hard.
All right. Tim Tszyu, he's back. Winning a fight over in Australia. Near shutout win over Anthony Velasquez, a Massachusetts-based fighter. I know Velasquez from back that neck of the woods. His trainer, Hector Bermudez. Good record for Velasquez, no resume. Kind of perfect matchmaking for Tim Tszyu in this sense. Tszyu has a new management team. He's working with Pedro Diaz as his trainer. Do you think this is the start of something new for Tim Tszyu? Or at 31 years old, is it too late for him to bounce back?
It's not something new. He beat a fighter from Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
What does that say? Nothing. Where are you from?
I'm from Massachusetts.
Exactly.
I don't fight.
It's false confidence coming back from Tim Tszyu. I told you the greatest fights of his career have been beaten out of him already because they put him through murderer's row of the toughest possible fights you can have, and he failed all of them. So you only have a certain amount of those wars in your system, and he already went through that system at 31 years old. Can he still beat these guys with good records that haven't fought anybody? Yeah, he can do that. But to come back and beat a Fundora or a Bakram Mutsalayev or anyone else at 154.
I can't wait till this this Bakram fight. I keep getting Bakram's last name wrong. This Bakram fight against Josh Kelly. Bakram better knock his block off, Sergio, because you have been all in on this guy.
It's not just me. It's a lot of former champions. There's a lot of people that know what they're watching. This dude is scary. He is scary, Chris.
I need to see more than just one win over Tim
Tszyu. I've seen enough.
You have
scares the hell out of me.
You've told me in the past you only watched one of his fights, and that was the Tim Tszyu fight. So you've watched 3 rounds of Bakram.
Hey man, all I got to do is watch a scary movie once and know it's scary.
Okay.
So,
I don't know. Like Tim Tszyu, this was the right guy for him to fight. A guy with no real power, no real resume, and a guy that he could just basically walk
and he
through.
looked good on his record.
Looked good in his record, his glossy record. When I watched that fight, I didn't see anything new from Tim Tszyu. Like, I just saw an offensive-oriented guy that doesn't move his head a lot.
I didn't need to see anything new. All right, well, let's break down
from
the
Tim
X's.
Tszyu, I'm saying.
Let's break the X's and O's. I don't need to see anything new. I just want to see the old confidence. I want to see that old right hand, and I've seen it.
Head movement. You want to see more
He's
head movement?
never
from
had
him?
head movement.
I know. That's why I want to see something new. You work with Pedro Diaz. Give me some head movement.
Time out here, Mannix. Before he got beaten up, he never was a head mover. He was always a laser-like right? He was just like his father, the great Kostya Tszyu. Kostya Tszyu and Tim Tszyu, they have timing and accuracy and power, especially with that right hand. They never were defensive wizards. They never had upper body movement. They got hit, but their power always, was a deciding factor. When they got hit, they hit someone hard and they went down. Tim Tszyu's not going to come back and be Pernell Whitaker. He's not going to be bouncing on his toes. I don't care if he has a Cuban great trainer in his corner in Pedro Diaz. He's not going to pick up that Cuban style. He is who he is, and that's what got him to the top, and that's what actually ultimately brought him down, that mindset. So Tim Tszyu looked good this fight against Dominguez. He showed flashes and confidence in that right hand.
Velasquez.
Velasquez, Dominguez, whatever. Irrelevant. Against the Murtazalali, but against the Bakrams, against the Fundoras, against the Boots Ennises.
Murtazaliev.
Against the Boots Ennises or everyone else, every other killer at 154. I just don't see Tim Tszyu coming back and doing what he used to do because his chin is shot. His resilience is shot. His punch resistance, all that is shot because of those beatdowns. And sad to say, at 31 years old, I just don't see him getting back to the top.
I think he needs to rebuild for a while. It's not one fight and I'm back. It's got to be 3 fights and let's see where we are. I do think there's enough offensive firepower in him to get back to a high level. Would I like to see him into that fight with Keith Thurman that was talked about for so long? Sure, I think it's a good fight for him. I mean, Keith Thurman, a small 154, a popular fight. Maybe on the back end of this rebuild, you do a fight like that. And then you see where we are. See where you are in 2026 when he's 32 years old. See what the landscape looks like. I don't want to see him in right now with a Virgil Ortiz or a Boots Ennis or another fight with Fundora. But can he get there? Maybe. Like, he's still got some pop to his game. But, the head movement, I think, is something that's got to get better. Like, you can't just accept that this is who he is. He's got to develop as a fighter.
Of course.
He's got to improve. We spent our last show, we talked about Diego Pacheco's need to improve. Footwork, the jab. I need to see head movement from Tim Tszyu. He is such a stationary target with that head. And in that weight class, with those punchers, they are going to take it off every time. He's got to get out of the line of fire when he's in the pocket.
Diego Pacheco is a 24-year-old contender that hasn't won a world title. He can still mature and develop and get better. You can't do that with an old dog, teach new tricks in a Tim Tszyu, a former champion who got to this level, being the stiff robot, strong stiff robot that he was. It just doesn't work that way, Mannix. That's not how boxing works. So I can tell you from this side of the fence that Tim Tszyu is shot. Oh, no, he's not shot. He's not shot. He's damaged goods. And one more physical fight, then he'll be shot. So I just don't see him progressing on the championship level when you're already close to being a shot fighter. That's what happens with beatdowns, man. That's what happens. Not only does it damage your confidence, but it damages your whole system. Your whole nervous system is just traumatized, man. And every time you get hit with a big shot or you start going through that fire, that old fire is gone. And now it's kind of just survival mode. And that's what happened to Tim Tszyu. As soon as he gets chinned by one of these top fighters, especially on the championship level, you're going to see him take a step back. You're going to see him shell up and be defensive. That's not who we are accustomed to seeing when it comes to Tim Tszyu.
All right, I just want to see where he's at in the fall of 2026. Let's see him get 2 more wins on his belt in the first half of next year.
Of course you do, because then you want to be proven
he's a popular
right.
guy.
I told you it was a mistake.
He's a former world champion.
I told you it was a mistake a year ago when he got beaten down by Fundora and then he got beaten down by Bakram, and I told you he was finished. You just want to come back and say that no, he had another chance. I'm glad he fought the best. I'm glad that he didn't, nitpick. I'm glad that nonsense. You were wrong. He was wrong. Tim Tszyu's management was wrong.
They were wrong.
Everyone was wrong.
I had a bunch of people texting me. I had a bunch of people texting me like the Velasquez fight. People were like, well, finally, someone in Tim Tszyu's team made a right decision.
Too little, too late.
They made a right decision. You're probably right, but we'll see what happens in 2026. All right, let's talk about the big one. Friday night, Miami, Florida, Casilla Center, 8-round fight between Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua. One of the most improbable heavyweight fights in boxing history will take place. No title on the line, but there will be a lot of people watching on Netflix. I want to unpack this from a few angles, Sergio. Let's start with AJ. He has faced some criticism from people in the UK, faced some criticism from former fighters. You are a former world champion. You are a former fighter. Do you have a problem with Anthony Joshua taking this fight?
When you were talking, I threw up a little bit in my mouth.
That's gross.
Well, it's a gross fight. When you said big event, Miami, and then you said an 8-round fight, I'm like, no, that's not how it works. Big event is 12 rounds. Big event is Las Vegas. Big event is 2 champions. But I'll give it to you. It's on Netflix. All right. It gathered eyeballs. You got to hand it to Jake Paul. Anthony Joshua, I don't mind him taking this fight. I really don't mind him taking this fight because he has a fight planned in February. So to squeeze in this little appetizer and get a lot of money just to beat down this Disney star, I don't mind it. I really don't care. It's easy money. And you see a lot of former champions, including myself, throwing their hat in the mix. I mean, you hear Bellew,
Tony
Cole
Bellew.
Frotch, Tony Bellew, Sergio Mora, a lot of guys saying, I'll fight that bum. It'll be the easiest money I'll ever make. Can you imagine being a 6'5", 250-pound former heavyweight champion? What he's thinking about this Disney star? When Joshua was a world champion in 2016, you know what Jake Paul was doing? He was acting on Disney. Come on, man. You don't fast forward. You don't fast forward that fast to fight a behemoth and a former champion and a guy that still can hurt you in Anthony Joshua. You're doing this for the payday, so I hope you enjoy the blood money, Jake Paul, because you're getting annihilated. It's going to be ugly. And then everyone's going to look in the mirror and say, like, why did we let that happen? And then the adults in the room are going to be like, oh, we gotta be better. And then everyone else that got this money and ran, they're not coming back because this is going to be embarrassment to the highest degree. Exactly like when Jake Paul fought Mike Tyson. It's going to be that same type of embarrassment.
Well, from Anthony Joshua's perspective, it's the easiest money he's ever going to make. Like, it's easier money than Francis Ngannou because at least Ngannou, we had just seen him go 10 rounds with Tyson Fury. We had just seen him knock down Tyson Fury. So there was an element of fear in that fight, given who Francis Ngannou was at that time. Jake Paul is coming off the biggest win of his professional boxing career, but it was against a blown-up super middleweight who was well past his prime in Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., and he couldn't knock out Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. So even though I have respect for Jake Paul's rise in boxing, and I do have some respect for the power of Jake Paul in that right hand, I cannot envision a scenario where Jake Paul wins this fight. So if you're Anthony Joshua, really the only risk, the only downside is if you get to the second half of the fight with Jake Paul. If you're into the 4th, 5th, 6th round, if God forbid you go to a decision, if this fight goes to the final bell, Anthony Joshua should just get the hell out of the ring. Like, don't even wait for that final decision. Don't do it, because even if your hand is raised in victory, that is not a win. It's not a win. So I don't have a problem with this for Anthony Joshua. He's getting paid, from what I'm told, around $30 million for this fight. That is easy money. He's got to stay in training camp, go into the February fight, and then gear up for that huge showdown against Tyson Fury in the second half of 2026. For Jake Paul, why do you think he's doing this? Because Jake Paul has the ability to fight basically anybody for real money. Like the Gervonta Davis fight, which wasn't really an official pro fight, was going to be for big money. Chavez Jr. was for big money. Even some of these low-level fights, the Andre August, the Ryan Borlands, Jake Paul's paychecks are outsized for that type of fights. Yes, this is probably going to be the biggest payday of Jake Paul's career. Well, maybe not, I guess. The Mike Tyson fight probably wound up being the biggest one. But Jake could fight anybody and still make a pile of money. Why do you think Jake is taking this fight? And do you, Sergio, who has dismissed Jake Paul a lot in our time over the years, do you have respect for Jake taking it?
Let me unpack that. First, why is he taking it? The money. I mean, look, I just talked about Bud Crawford having integrity and intelligence and discipline for not taking the money because he already accomplished everything he wanted to accomplish. Well, on the flip side of that, the embarrassment and the shamelessness of Jake Paul willing to get hurt and knocked out on the biggest stage possible with the eyeballs looking at you for a payday. Payday, as Canelo would like to say. It's all money, man. And Jake Paul is athletic and strong enough to not really get knocked out like Ngannou, all right? So don't expect the Francis Ngannou one-punch devastating knockout where it can really seriously hurt Jake Paul. Jake Paul's strong enough to absorb him and put his hands up and get beaten around the ring where they stop the fight on his feet. Or he might get dropped and pummeled down, but he's not knocked out on his feet is what I'm saying. So for that kind of payday, for that type of incredible money, Jake Paul's laughing at this opportunity saying, look, I got in great shape. I can take a punch. I know how to survive. I know how to avoid the big punch, the one that are going to get you hurt and knocked out. I'll go against Anthony Joshua. Not only that, but he's chinny. I think he's chinny. I think if I land a good shot, I'm strong enough where I can maybe rock Anthony Joshua. That I don't deny. That I do not deny. So if there's any kind of sliver of hope, if Jake Paul can land an overhand right to an over-aggressive Anthony Joshua, yes, Jake Paul will wobble this big man and former heavyweight champion. Because that's what happens when you learn how to punch. Jake Paul learned how to punch. He didn't learn how to box, but he learned how to punch. So that club punch that I like to call, if you learn how to do that and not fall off balance, and you can aim it accurately at any fighter, you're going to hurt any fighter. So I give Jake Paul a puncher's chance if Anthony Joshua gets over-aggressive, just like he did against Daniel Dubois.
Look, Jake Paul is obviously doing this for the money. Jake Paul has said he loves to make big events. I do think that this delusional confidence that Jake Paul speaks in, I think that's not an act. I think he actually has delusional confidence.
I don't think that's an act either. I just think he's that ignorant. He's that much of a showman. He's that much of a kid to a teenager to a man that has gotten his way on all stages of his life thinking that way. So why is he going to change now? Even if it's the hurt game, even if it's something that can literally get you hurt for life, he's never been a hurt or hurting in life. So he doesn't know what he's being exposed to. And because of that, everyone that has bled in boxing can't wait for this kid to get his head caved in, because like, you shouldn't belong. You don't belong in our sport, Jake Paul, and you're going to be an example of why you shouldn't play boxing.
I think Jake, I'll reiterate, I think Jake does belong in boxing. I think Jake brings real value to boxing, not just with his events, but the events he puts on with MVP, the fighters he's putting on the undercard, like Alicia Baumgardner is getting great exposure on this show. Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano got great exposure on the last Netflix show. So there is real value in having Jake Paul in boxing. I just think I've watched all his interviews, these last couple of weeks, like one he did where he said like this AJ fight is going to play out just like the fight between AJ and Usyk. He's like comparing his skill set to Usyk, who has some of the greatest footwork of any heavyweight in any era. The delusional confidence is not an act. He actually is going into this fight believing he can win. Now, I think there's only one way this fight can end. Well, before we get into that, we're sitting here calling it a mismatch. And most people in boxing believe it's a mismatch. The odds makers, though, Sergio, over at DraftKings, they are not looking at this as big a mismatch as other people are. Jake Paul in between 6 and 8 to 1 as an underdog. Now, those are big odds, but you and I have called fights, recent fights, where the odds have been much wider. This feels like Jake Paul should be a 20 to 1 underdog. Why do you think that the odds makers have made it as close as it is?
Because DraftKings, which is our sponsor, knows what they're doing.
You're just so proud of yourself when you
I'm finally getting paid by you, so yes. I'm finally getting paid. They know what they're doing. They know that all the money that they're generating, they know how to maneuver it one way and another. The reason Jake Paul is a favorite here, because so much money has been thrown at this and thrown at him and his way, and his ignorant fans are probably putting money on him. Same way that Jake Paul was a favorite against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Junior should have beaten Jake Paul if Junior had any kind of heart and cojones and any kind of condition, but he didn't. So they rolled the dice and they won on that one, and he was an overwhelming favorite. For this one, it's a little confusing. I don't know the numbers behind of what this fight.
The odds makers are basically saying that Jake Paul has something of a chance.
There must be so much money being thrown in Jake Paul's direction where the odds and the odd in the book, they have to even it out and start saying he's not that much of an underdog. Forget what's going to happen in the ring. We're looking at money. We're looking at how much money is being bet on Jake Paul, how much money is being bet on Anthony Joshua. That's what they're going off of. It's just basically they're weighing how much money. That's how odds are.
Some of these odds, thank you for teaching me odds. Some of these odds are just wacky though. Like I saw this morning that Anthony Joshua is minus 450 by knockout. Like, that's not a great, in any other circumstance, I probably wouldn't touch that bet. But this feels like the only outcome can be an Anthony Joshua knockout. Like, minus 450, and I got in trouble for saying this before, that's put your kids' college tuition
There he goes.
on.
I'm
right
betting
there.
Jake Paul,
Put
ladies and
some
gentlemen.
money on it right now. AJ by knockout at minus 450 is a great number if you're looking for some certainty there, because I just can't picture Jake Paul going 8 3-minute rounds with Anthony Joshua. I can't see it happening. So I guess it brings it back. Like, what are these odds makers thinking? What are they seeing to make you believe that, to make them believe that Jake Paul has even a 10% chance of winning?
Because, Chris Mannix, Jake Paul is a composed and ferocious finisher.
That he is not.
Watch this in your ignorant words. It's all money, man. It's all money. It has nothing to do with what the odds makers are seeing and what Anthony Joshua could potentially do to Jake Paul. It's all money. How much money is in the middle of the pot, and how many people bet on Jake Paul? Wow, okay, well, now we got to even out the odds here. It has nothing to do with skill and will and anything else. Anthony Joshua should annihilate this kid, this Disney kid. Annihilate him in under 2 rounds. I would say if you really wanted to, and put the pressure on him, and even beat him into submission while he's trying to survive with the gloves up. He's that big, that strong, and that much of a fighter. We can beat him into submission and embarrass him. And I hope Anthony Joshua does that. But if he wants to entertain the crowd and maybe make it a show.
He doesn't sound like it. He doesn't sound like a guy looking to entertain the crowd. He sounds like a guy looking to take a guy out early and go home with a big paycheck.
Then maybe he lets him survive 1 round. You didn't let me finish. But if it goes past 2 rounds, shame on Anthony Joshua. And the joke's on us.
I think that's true. I think if it gets, just like we said, if it gets to the second half of the fight, it's a win for Jake Paul, regardless of the outcome. So how does this end? Your official prediction on Paul Joshua?
Anthony Joshua by knockout, but it might go into the 3rd round just because. I don't know why. I'm just going to say it there because I'm going to prove myself wrong. If it goes past 2 rounds, and it will go that, I think he gets beaten up. He's not going to try to win. And he gets beaten down while he's covering. I think Jake Paul gets beaten to his knees while he's covering up, not trying to win. That's another thing. I don't think Jake Paul goes out like Peter McNeely, just guns blazing, knocked out, from the first round. I think he's
Peter
careful,
McNeely went out that
starts to
great
move, tries to box, tries to avoid a shot, tries to throw a looping shot here and there. Once he realizes he's in there with a real fighter, then he's just going to cover up like a coward.
Well, I will never refer to a guy that gets in the ring with an Anthony Joshua as a coward. I think that's the wrong word to apply to this situation.
For $50 million, any coward will get in the ring.
I don't know if I agree with that either. Like, it's still nerve-wracking to get into the ring with Anthony Joshua. Look, I'm on the same page as you. I think 3rd round knockout as well. That's what I had down. Mostly because AJ, I don't think he's going to come out trying to blitz the guy. Like, AJ, even if he knows that Joshua is not on his level, I think he will have a healthy amount of respect for him coming into this fight. And I think he'll treat him like a real fighter early on. I think there'll be some caginess to the 1st round. I think he'll step on the gas a little in the 2nd round. Maybe he knocks Jake down in the 3rd round. I think he gets him out of there. I'm curious how it happens. Is it a big body shot that maybe saves Jake from the kind of Ngannou-like knockout that we saw a couple of years ago? Is it a grazing shot that Jake takes a knee on and doesn't get up on? Either way, 3rd round knockout is my prediction. Do you think this will be the last that we'll see of Jake Paul? If he gets knocked out by Anthony Joshua, do you think we see Jake back in the ring?
No, because he was supposed to fight Tank, a lightweight champion, and then he decided last minute to fight a former heavyweight champion. So that switch from a 5'5" guy to a guy that's 6'6", that goes to show you how crazy he is. All right, so he's just gonna
in a month time.
He'll probably say something like this, along the lines of like, I attempted to do something great when Tank, wussed out of our fight, and I fought.
Which would be true.
Yeah, and I wanted to save the show, and I wanted to give my fans what they, he's gonna go on promoter talk there, and he's gonna be like a circus act saying, no, it wasn't me, it was Tank. So he'll probably end up going back to Tank or end up going to someone else, someone that's not a huge former heavyweight champion. Anyone else that's under 160 that's a professional fighter, former champion level around there, yeah, I could see him coming back. Because right here, he just bit off more than he can chew, and he did it because his initial plan A didn't pan out. So he had to improvise with plan B.
Yeah, I don't think this is the end for him. Either way, is it a bad look if he gets blitzed in 60 seconds in the first round? Yeah, that would probably be the worst case scenario for Jake Paul. But regardless of the outcome, he can say, look, I was training for a lightweight. I had Shakur Stevenson in my camp. I pivoted on a month's notice and brought guys like Lawrence Okoli and Frank Sanchez and some other top heavyweights into my camp to prepare for a guy that is still arguably the biggest puncher in the heavyweight division. I think there is room for explanation here, room to kind of put it aside and go back to trying to become a cruiserweight. Hell, now that Crawford's retired, what's Canelo going to do? Like, what's the big fight for Canelo Alvarez? Like, that's to me, a Canelo fight with Jake Paul is now back on the table. Like, do you think Canelo is looking at the 168-pound division going, you know what? Diego Pacheco is a good fight for me. How about a rematch with Edgar Berlanga? How about a fight against Christian Bealey? Why would Canelo Alvarez want to do that? I think that Jake fights Anthony Joshua here. I think a Canelo fight is back in the mix. He'd have to fight somebody else first, maybe get a win, look better. But I think a Canelo fight for Jake Paul is still on the table regardless of the outcome of this fight.
Incredible. Mike Tyson, Chavez Jr., a potential Anthony Joshua fight, and then Canelo Alvarez. That's a winner right there. So no matter how much I talk about Jake Paul as a fighter, as a businessman, as a promoter, and as a troll, you got to salute him.
You know what's a great fight to prepare for Canelo Alvarez, an older Mexican?
Me.
A much older Mexican in Sergio Mora.
I would love it. Anytime, anywhere, I will take your Disney butt to school.